Hi, my name is Benedict. This video is introducing the SpaceTape. SpaceTape is actually a VST in the 2.4 and 3 variety, but you are going to see it here tested and run displayed as a Combinator 2 in Reason 12. So inside we have SpaceTape. This is the VST, and it's carried forward onto a faceplate. Let's just keep that open for a moment so you can see that every feature is carried forward. So when you download this, if you're just downloading and using the VST, it will look slightly different, but it will look like this. But for ease of use, I will use the Combinator version. Now the Combinator version, if you are a Reason 12 or higher user, comes in the download in the 2.4 folder because at the moment that's what is relevant for. So what does SpaceTape do? Let's start with some demonstrations before I get too talky on you. This is a somewhat chaotic drum rhythm that I have made for you using multi-slot in Mimic. Quite literally, dragged in some sounds from Drum Supply and, well, did virtually nothing to them. And let's hear what happens when we apply SpaceTape. First thing you'll notice, we do roll off some highs. Those ultra highs are very attractive, but they do become a problem, especially in Reason, which is so pristine with its audio that you can end up with a mix ultimately that's got so many highs in it that you end up feeling like you've got that curse of Reason sound, or a thin, brittle, or papery kind of sound that lacks warmth and body, simply because you've got far too much up there, above 10K is all still hammering away. So this, by default, will tend to roll a fair amount of that off, as tape is very prone to doing. So the knobs, the input knob is a trim. It's not a full go from nothing to 11, it's just a trim, so you can roll some off or add some more in. This is not actually designed to be a replacement for your favorite distortion pedal. There is no reason why you can't start to push this into drive, and it'll go there pretty darned easily, as tape will, but it's not its main design. You've got a boost button for those of you who do want to push it a little harder. Sometimes you will be presented with a low signal. And if we look at our comparison here before after, we're just pushing that a little bit more. That will, in most cases, if you've got a reasonably staged gain, get you into drive territory. The bulk knob is a little oddly named, but it's there to give you a little bit more body to the signal. It uses a kind of drive, so it will actually push you into distortion, and that drive by its nature tends to give you the feeling of more low and low mids than highs, so it makes everything seem bulkier. Be cautious in your use of it, because everything that you do for input gain here is going to affect further down the chain. We might as well get to this first, because this is a level and drive based thing too. This is a saturation type. Again, doesn't actually have the ability to go to 11 and beyond, but if your signal is reasonably well staged at the beginning, which is what the input gain is for, then it will definitely be pushing you just over the edge, and if you've got a hot signal, it will start to tear. So if you want to get that kind of choking, torn sound from too much level, you will get it from here. It's not the main aim, but you definitely will get there with this. Otherwise, if you're just wanting the saturation to give you those overtones and some brightness, that's not going to be that sort of too much 10 plus K signal, then your saturation is a nice way of going, because you've rolled off and then you put it back in with the saturated overtones. Will give you a nice feel, especially with things like these hi-hats. In the middle, we have the tape-based things. We have a wow and flutter, which are musically or arbitrarily designed. At no point is this device, even though it references tape, at no point is it scientifically designed to copy any kind of piece of tape. It's just the feel of, well, in a reasonably okay situation, this is probably what tape would feel like, or at least we'd want it to feel like that. Often it didn't sound very good at all. If you were using high quality tape, yeah, sure, it was better, but tape that we used in home studios was not great. You won't hear this super clearly here on the drum material, but it adds a couple of layers of, and everything in here is, I'm going to say, is a kind of secret sauce. Anyone who knows what this is knows what it is anyway. There's nothing hidden, but it adds a couple of layers of movement, slow and fast. You can set the general amount of it, and then you can push it into far too much. At this point, we can feel even more that those drums are getting wonky. And that's the whole idea. That broken button is really more for the Knight Rider community who like everything to be all the time. And there are times where it may be useful, but otherwise, somewhere in the first half of the thrower, the knob is probably going to be plenty. If you're running this on an instrument, you might use all of these controls a little harder. If you're running this on a master, which was originally designed for, hence all the controls being limited in their throw, then you'll probably want to keep it lower. Otherwise, your whole song will just sound drunk. The idea with everything in here is that there's subtle movement everywhere. And so putting that onto a master and making sure that you're not running it too hot, which is pretty easy to do. But so long as your levels are good, then you will find that suddenly you just get this little extra sparkle. Plus, you'll get a greater sense of clarity, even though we are losing a lot of those high highs. So, wow and flutter, that can make it just kind of move around a little. Try to avoid drunkenness unless that's your real aim in life. The tape tone are, again, a couple of secret sauce, tiny EQ moves to add a little bit of welly. You'll feel just a little bit of nice body comes in, and there is some movement being done on the top end as well. This is not a knob deliberately, because it's just, well, tape is prone to doing a couple of things to the tone, and this is an on or an off. If you want to play with EQ, Reason has lots of EQ options. Saturation we've covered, and then output is just a trim. So we've done stuff to it. We can see we've gotten a little louder. If we need to trim our output, we can do so. So you can use it to push harder again. There's absolutely nothing to stop you if you want to do this, if you want to start to get into ugly and ripped up territory, from running one of these pretty hot and then putting it into another one, like straight into another one. So you could be, amping your levels there. That's a common enough technique in saturation that you use a saturator and then you use another saturator afterwards. I will advise generally that you would want to put saturator, some other kind of device. So a saturator, maybe it's a chorus, maybe it's a phaser, and then your next saturator. Because if you just saturate a saturator, there's nothing wrong with it, but it can start to become a little pointless without the extra movement from the thing in the middle. So, with that, with, obviously, in every situation, the aim of these is to taste. It's a character device, and a synth sound made from a couple of CS80 samples from the sound bank. There's a little bit of random, which is sometimes just a little too much, I think, in hindsight. Yep, that's cool. Now we'll bring in SpaceTape. Straight away we can hear a little bit of burr of drive. Plus we can hear that little bit of extra wander. There's wander already on top of in the mimic, because it's using LFOs and randomness on each of the oscillators there. Just overdo that. So as I said, keep this kind of low, or you could end up with a very drunken sounding piece. See how that straight away pushes us into drive, because it's inputting a much higher level to this drive unit and to this drive unit. So just watch what you're putting in. If you're running too hot, pull it back. And then you can look at these. There's nothing at all to stop you from pulling it back and pushing these up. The way you drive one of these into another from here will actually change the sound that you get. So the sound with pulling this down, pushing this up will be different from pushing this up, pulling this down, or pulling that down and pushing this right up. You will get different results. The differences may be subtle, but you get slightly different results for what's driving what, where, and how. Again, that little tone, you will notice it in and out, but only very subtly. Obviously, if you put this on every device in your music chain and then put it on your masters, you may overdo the little humps and bumps that are created with the tone button. But if that sounds good, that's exactly what you're looking for, so great. There is an oversampling option which runs between, just so you can see it, the off 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32 times a sample. So whatever your sample rate. If we're at 44, then it becomes 88. My advice is obviously to taste, but I'm not a massive fan of oversampling. It can make things sound nicer, most definitely. If you're just looking to not do anything differently and uncramp the modern fashion, your high frequency, then just set it to 4 and forget about it. Understand that setting it to 4 and forgetting about it will be using a bit more DSP than entirely necessary if you are prepared to use the common sense workaround, which is to set your device to off, and then when you come to export at 16-bit 192K. That way you've oversampled what's coming out. There shouldn't be any drama with any reasonable device that you're using in your chain. There should be very few VST these days. Definitely there shouldn't be anything in the Reason devices or REs that isn't going to just automatically upscale its signal and its quality. That will knock dead any reasonable amount of aliasing or cramping in your high EQs. So you export at 16-bit, there's no point wasting your time going to 24-bit, because by the time you've compressed the buggery out of your piece, you do not need to have a higher dynamic range. There's no gain in it at all. I mean, go for it if you just think that you can end up with a bigger file and that's going to make you feel better, but it's not necessary. So 16.192 or whatever you want to do there, pull that file that's been exported straight back into your track, so all your tempos and everything will match. Solo that and then export it, as your 1644, and you will have a fully oversampled piece, like as in you've now oversampled absolutely every track that's in your piece, but it's at 1644. Winning. Quick explanation below this on my page of what the knobs and buttons do again, but you've basically got it. The download link is on the official page on my site. It's not going to be put up anywhere else. Let other people know, but don't hand the device around. Please send them to my page. If you are getting value from this device or any other thing else that I have done, and you think, you know, it'd be good to support Benedict in this, not only is engagement on my page is great, but pop on over to my Bandcamp, buy one of my albums. If you're not warm for the kind of music that I make, give it to your mum, give it to your dentist, give it to your least favourite accountant. Who cares? That puts money in my pocket, as well as giving you something that maybe you will love if you sit down and go, now I get what that guy's about. You have a great day now.